Have you ever had that moment where you were dragged into some bizarre trend just because everyone else was doing it? Maybe you jumped on the oat milk bandwagon, bought those ridiculous TikTok leggings that go up your butt, or decided crypto was the future just before everything tanked. Well, picture yourself in ancient Canaan, where keeping up with the Joneses didn't mean getting a new chariot, it meant tossing your firstborn into a fiery pit in front of a dubious statue, because this was apparently how to keep the gods happy. So, who was Moloch? This definitely wasn't some warm and fuzzy god handing out blessings and rainbows. Moloch was portrayed as a bull-headed deity with a reputation for demanding pretty extreme sacrifices. Think less peaceful yoga retreat and more fire and brimstone with a side of ritualized horror. The name Moloch is found in ancient texts from various civilizations, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and even in biblical accounts. And this guy wasn't satisfied with simple offerings like grain or wine, he wanted the real deal. In the Hebrew Bible, Moloch isn't just a distant figure of myth, he's the embodiment of something darker, ritualistic child sacrifice. Parents weren't simply passing on blessings or invoking spirits, they were quite literally passing their children through fire in brutal offerings. This wasn't a symbolic tale or a metaphorical poetic exaggeration. Ancient texts paint a chilling picture, a towering bronze statue, arms outstretched in a grotesque embrace, waiting to receive its grim tribute. It's a haunting reminder of how far misplaced devotion can go when fear and power intertwine. But how did this grim practice even get rolling? Ancient civilizations had a serious obsession with keeping their gods happy, and if you think modern-day superstitions are quirky, they've got nothing on the old days. Forget knocking on wood or avoiding black cats, which is ridiculous by the way, black cats are awesome, justice for black cats. Back then, appeasing the gods wasn't about small rituals or good luck charms. These folks believed that to secure a bountiful harvest or dodge the next big plague, they had to offer up something truly precious. And what could be more valuable than the lives of their own children? When crops were failing or disease was lurking, people didn't reach for a lucky rabbit's foot, they reached for something irreplaceable. Over in Carthage, the practice of child sacrifice reached horrifying levels. Archaeologists have uncovered what they call tophets, ritual burial grounds filled with urns holding the charred bones of infants. These sites are practically smoking gun evidence that the Carthaginians engaged in child sacrifices to a deity known as Baal Hammon, often associated with Moloch. And let's be clear, even the Romans, who had a flair for public executions and gladiator blood sports, called the Carthaginians barbarians for doing this. And let's face it, when the Romans think you're barbaric, you're probably doing something really messed up. Historical accounts from the Romans describe Carthaginian priests drumming up fear of divine wrath and convincing people that the only way to save their city was to throw their children into the fire. Imagine being so persuasive that you convince an entire civilization to turn human sacrifice into a civic duty. Talk about toxic peer pressure. But why would people sacrifice to Moloch? It's tempting to think of these ancient societies as brutal and irrational, but they were dealing with some truly harsh realities: famine, war, disease, and that made them desperate. And what's more extreme than offering your child to a god in exchange for safety, good harvests, or victory in battle? When you're convinced that the gods control everything, you do whatever it takes to stay on their good side. Imagine being a parent in ancient Canaan. The rains haven't come in months, your crops are dying, and your entire village is starving. The priests tell you that Moloch demands the ultimate sacrifice, a child, for the survival of everyone. The peer pressure, social fear, and religious terror all combine to convince you that it's the right thing to do. If you're thinking, there's no way I'd do that, just remember that desperate people in desperate situations can be convinced of almost anything. I mean, some people still argue that crocs look good. These rituals weren't just some creepy secret ceremonies tucked away in dark corners, they were public events, the ancient equivalent of a Super Bowl halftime show. But instead of touchdowns and flashy ads, the crowd got fire, terror, and mass hysteria. Picture this: a giant bronze statue of Moloch, hollowed out and blazing like a furnace, its outstretched arms waiting for offerings. Worshippers would lay their children on those burning arms, watching as they rolled into the flames below. And to cover up the horror, drums and flutes blasted at full volume, drowning out the screams with a twisted symphony. Disturbing? Absolutely. It was an ancient PR move straight out of a nightmare, because nothing says please the gods like infanticide. According to ancient accounts, the priests of Moloch didn't just rely on fear, they mastered the art of spinning horror into heroism. They convinced families that sacrificing their children wasn't just an act of devotion, it was a noble duty, a way to protect the entire community from divine wrath. Talk about a twisted PR campaign. It's like saying, you're not losing a child, you're saving everyone. This psychological power play created loyalty through fear, turning parents into participants in their own tragedy. It's the same manipulative tactic that cult leaders and authoritarian regimes still use today, make people believe that their personal suffering is a noble sacrifice for the greater good. It's so grotesque and insidious that it makes modern propaganda techniques, like airbrushed political ads or influencer spin, look like a bedtime story. So, what happened to Moloch after ancient times? He didn't just retire to the dusty corners of history, he evolved into a powerful symbol for all kinds of power-driven, soul-sucking systems. Moloch became shorthand for the monstrous sacrifices demanded by ruthless rulers, oppressive regimes, or ideologies that devour people in the name of progress. John Milton knew this well. In Paradise Lost, he reimagined Moloch as a bloodthirsty demon, advocating for total war in hell, a metaphor for unchecked, destructive ambition. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Allen Ginsberg brought Moloch into the modern age in his poem Howl, where he raged against the dehumanizing effects of capitalism and industrial society. Ginsberg didn't hold back, calling out Moloch, whose mind is pure machinery. He wasn't just talking about factories, he was taking aim at a system that values productivity over people, efficiency over empathy, a cold, mechanical force that chews people up and spits them out. It's the same idea we see echoed today when people talk about selling their souls to climb the corporate ladder or getting swallowed up by the grind. From ancient sacrifices to modern soul-crushing systems, Moloch has become the ultimate metaphor for what happens when power, greed, and ideology demand more than anyone should ever give. He's the cautionary tale that keeps coming back, reminding us to ask, what are we sacrificing, and for what? Today, Moloch is often used symbolically to criticize power structures that sacrifice people's lives, well-being, or freedoms for wealth, power, or control. And if you wander into certain corners of the internet, you'll find conspiracy theories claiming that modern elites are part of a Moloch-worshipping cabal, sacrificing the innocent to maintain their influence. While these theories are light on facts and heavy on paranoia, they tap into an ancient fear that's persisted for thousands of years, that somewhere, behind closed doors, someone is pulling the strings and demanding sacrifices for their own gain. Even if the stories of Moloch are a mix of history and mythology, there's no denying that human sacrifice was a harsh reality in the ancient world. It definitely happened. Civilizations from the Mayans to the Celts to the Aztecs practiced it in one form or another. Moloch may have become a symbol, but the fear and desperation that fueled these sacrifices were very, very real. Archaeological evidence shows that child sacrifice wasn't just an occasional ritual either, it was a deeply ingrained part of some ancient societies. Whether it was priests of Carthage sacrificing infants to Moloch or Aztec priests offering lives to their gods atop towering temples, the pattern is clear. When fear and faith combine with desperation, the results are often horrifying. In the end, sacrificing to Moloch might be the worst trend in ancient times, but it's a trend that still echoes today. Back then, it was literal sacrifices to appease the gods. Today, it's symbolic sacrifices to appease power-hungry leaders, corrupt systems, or ruthless ideologies. Moloch has become a metaphor for every time the powerful convince the powerless to give up their well-being, their rights, or even their humanity for some so-called greater good. Think about it. When corporations cut corners on safety for profit, when regimes send young soldiers into pointless wars, or when companies exploit workers in the name of efficiency, it's just Moloch rebranded for the modern era. Take the 2008 financial crisis. For example, banks played with people's livelihoods like chips in a casino, and when it all came crashing down, it was the everyday folks who got burned while the big players got bailed out. Sacrifice the little guy to save the mighty? Sounds like Moloch in a pinstripe suit with a briefcase. As long as humanity keeps sacrificing the innocent to feed the ambitions of the powerful, Moloch isn't just a footnote in ancient history. He's the cautionary tale we never quite seem to learn from, a reminder that when fear, control, and power are in play, the innocent often pay the price.